Where do you sit on how the government should incentivise this if it needs to, tying it perhaps to welfare, to being able to go to work? Would that be a sensible policy?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. Look, I think there are some preliminaries we need to deal with first, and that goes to things like the effectiveness of the vaccine, whether or not it is effective at 50%, 65%. The government will have to be very, very transparent about that. It also needs to be transparent about about the approvals process. We have to remember that when COVID Safe was introduced, had great advocacy from all manner of people in government, including the Prime Minister, and yet we now know it didn't work. So first step is we have to be completely transparent, and the government needs to be very clear about what the threshold is that will be acceptable, and indeed what other measures will need to be put in place if it is only 50% effective. We'll need to have other measures in place. Then, assuming we get past those preliminaries, I think it is probably appropriate to have some incentives to make sure that we protect the community.
All right. And in terms of the other issue for your state right now, wine exports in South Australia, what do you make of this investigation into dumping that's been announced by China? I mean, it seems as though China right now is borderline abusing its membership of the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, look, China appears to be mixing politics with trade. There's no question that this is politically motivated. It was foreshadowed by the ambassador earlier in the year. The claim that Australian wines are dumping is just ludicrous. Australian wines are traded in China on the basis of quality, not price. And what's happening here is the Chinese government are in essence trying to set an example around the world as to why you need to comply with Beijing's will. The government needs to respond to this. They firstly need to help our winemakers for a situation which is beyond their control, but taking a multilateral approach, making sure China understands this is not acceptable, and indeed making sure that we are exploring other markets. And I know the government has been doing that.
So, as to China, though, I mean, what to do? It's difficult for the government. It took a stand on the COVID-19 inquiry. I think a lot of people would agree on that. Does it rely on other members of the WTO to finally stand up to China? There are these arbitrary investigations and tariffs slapped on China. It was invited in 2001 to the WTO. It gets all the benefits. It hasn't properly opened up its economy to others in terms of investment. It still steals IP as well.
Yeah, there are all of these problems, and look, we want to have fair trade, but that goes both ways. This is a political issue. It's in effect coercion, and our government needs to recognise that. I think it understands that, and we need to work with a number of other countries. And I think that we are seeing a number of countries now starting to work together to deal with this issue. And I think the president in China may well be making a strategic error in his approach.
You've obtained a valuation on what the Commonwealth should have paid. This is a controversial story that's been rolling for a while. This is what the Commonwealth should have paid for water from two large properties in Queensland. This is confirmation that the water was valued supposedly at $40 million. The price paid was $80 million. So you've been delving into this. Why do you think it happened?
Well, so your viewers will remember the Watergate scandal that took place during the election campaign, and these properties are associated with that particular campaign. I have for 2 years, both through Senate processes and through Freedom of Information, been trying to get access to a valuation that was the basis for the purchase. And finally, I was given that at the vinegar stroke of the Information Commissioner ordering the department to provide it to me. And it does show that we paid well above the odds, and that requires explanation. We've now managed to get some transparency. We now need to get accountability. This is recklessness. This is recklessness with taxpayers' dollars, and it is totally unacceptable.
But where to from here? When you say transparency, what are you seeking to get exactly? Who are you going to be asking questions of? Are you making any accusations at this stage?
Well, now that we have the facts before us, at the next round of estimates, the water officials will have to appear and justify how or why they spent twice the amount of money that they needed to on water, twice the amount of taxpayers' money. And indeed, the Auditor General, there will be some questions for the Auditor General. I have great respect for the Auditor General, but in this instance, it appears as though he may have got it wrong in his recent water audit, suggesting that these properties were bought within the valuation range, and they were not.
What about, does it go to a ministerial level or not?
Oh, I think this goes all the way up to ministerial level, no doubt. Ministers are employed to basically run departments. They are ultimately responsible for all things that go on. And in this case, it was the minister that signed off on the purchase.
All right, well, we'll keep following that story as the more evidence piles up there. Rex, Patrick, thanks for your time.